Hello everyone. Welcome to the Hidden Cipher, a channel dedicated to solving the most mysterious mysteries on the planet. If you are looking for a story to listen to before falling asleep, rest assured, this video will take you on a fascinating journey of discovery. And perhaps, you will sleep better knowing that these mysteries are still out there, waiting to be discovered. Today, we will take a look at one of the most chilling mysteries in modern history, the incident that occurred in Russia's Ural Mountains in 1959. Known as the Dyatlov Pass tragedy, this is not only the story of 9 young, talented climbers who died under mysterious circumstances, but also a mystery that has puzzled investigators, scientists and enthusiasts for more than 6 decades. Picture this scene. Tents ripped open from the inside, bare footprints in the snow at -30 degrees Celsius. 9 bodies found scattered, some nearly naked, some with severe internal injuries but no external bruises. 1 victim's tongue missing, clothes emitting radiation, and locals talk of strange glowing orbs flying in the night sky. Was this a natural disaster? Or was something more sinister, more unpredictable happening on that desolate mountain? Throughout the sentence in this story, we'll delve into every detail, from the final days of the expedition to the mysterious investigation with its hidden reports, and finally to the myriad theories ranging from avalanches, secret Soviet weapons, aliens, to strange meteorological phenomena. Each clue leads to more questions. Each answer opens a new layer of mystery. If you love true stories about the unexplainable, cases that push human reason to the limit, then this is the story for you. And don't forget to subscribe to the Hidden Cipher channel so you don't miss our next mystery-solving journeys. Hit the notification button to stay updated with the latest videos. Now, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let me take you back to the winter of 1959, where 9 passionate Russian students embarked on a journey from which they would never return. In January 1959, in a small room at the Ural Polytechnic Institute in the city of Sverdlovsk, now Yekaterinburg, Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old fifth-year radio engineering student, was spreading maps on a table. The young man was planning a Category 3 expedition, the most difficult level of expedition permitted in the Soviet Union at the time, requiring a trek of at least 300 kilometers over high mountain terrain in winter. It was not Igor's first trip, but it was his most ambitious. Igor's eyes scanned the list of his companions. Their destination was Mount Atorton, about 10 kilometers north of where the incident occurred. The name, Atorton, means, "Don't go there," in the Mansi language, the indigenous people of the region. But for the enthusiastic young climbers, it was an irresistible challenge. According to documents found in the expedition tent, the trip was named after the 21st Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and was probably organized by the local Komsomol. This was completely normal in the Soviet era. Everything had to be political. But behind the political facade was a genuine passion of young people for the wilderness. Igor has gathered a group of 9 other people for the trip, mostly his classmates and colleagues at the university. Let's get to know these people, the people who fate has chosen for a tragic story. Igor Alexeyevich Dyatlov, 23 years old, 5th-year radio engineering student, is the leader of the delegation. Experienced, calm, well-organized, Igor is not only the planner, but also the soul of the trip. Zinaida Alekyevna Kolmogorova, 22 years old, one of 2 female students in the delegation. She is a 5th-year student of the radio engineering faculty, a close friend of Igor. In her diary, Zinaida always shows optimism and love for nature. Lyudmila Alexandrovna Dubinina, 20 years old, 3rd-year engineering student, the youngest and most energetic member of the group. Lyudmila is famous for an incredible story. On a previous expedition, she was accidentally shot by a hunter with a shotgun. Instead of waiting for a rescue helicopter, she cheerfully skied 50 miles to the nearest clinic. Such resilience demonstrates the extraordinary spirit of the members. Yuri Nikolaevich Doroshenko, 21 years old, 4th-year student of the radio engineering faculty, a close friend of Igor since the early days of university. Yuri Alexeyevich Krivonishenko, 23 years old, an engineering graduate, working at a secret nuclear research facility in Chelyabinsk 40. This is an important detail that we will return to later. Alexander Sergeyevich Kolevatov, 24 years old, fifth-year student, also connected with nuclear facilities. Close friend of Krivonishenko. Rustam Vladimirovich Slobodin, 23 years old. Graduate engineer, experienced mountaineer. Nikolai Vladimirovich Thibault Brinol, 23 years old. Recently graduated engineer, of French-Russian descent. An excellent mountaineer. And finally, Semyon Alexander Alexeyevich Zolotaryov, 37 years old, who was special in the group because of his much older age than the others. Zolotaryov was a certified person who went with another expedition of similar difficulty, but was transferred to Dyatlov's group. He was a sports instructor, a veteran of World War II, studying for a certificate as a mountaineer and ski instructor. The fact that a 37-year-old stranger unexpectedly joined this group of young students became one of the details that made many people skeptical about the true nature of the trip. On January 8, 1959, the Sverdlovsk City Committee for Physical Culture and Sports approved the group of 10 people. The number 10, because there was one more person, Yuri Yefimovich Yudin. On January 23, 1959, the Dyatlov group was given an itinerary, which indicated that they would be traveling along Route 5. That same day, the group left the city of Sverdlovsk. There was excitement in the air on the train. They even published a small newspaper about the trip, called Evening Ortotin, with the headline, "From now on, we know that the Yeti exists." They may have been kidding themselves. The group arrived in Ivdel, a town in the northern province center of Sverdlovsk region, early on the morning of January 25, 1959. They then took a truck to Vizay, a truck village that was the last inhabited settlement in the north. This was the border between civilization and wilderness. On January 27, they began their trek towards Gora Atordin. The snow was thick, the wind was cold, and the temperature was -25 degrees Celsius. But for experienced climbers, this was just a normal challenge. But then, something important happened. On January 28, one member, Yuri Yudin, who suffered from a number of medical conditions including rheumatism and a congenital heart defect, returned because of knee and joint pain that made it impossible for him to continue. If he had stayed with them for just a few more days, he would have died in the accident that killed them all. Yuri Yudin, the sole survivor, became the last witness to see the remaining 9 friends alive. In the years that followed, he would spend his life searching for answers about the deaths of his friends. Until his death in 2013, Yudin later said, "I can say the same for the rest of them. Although we did not go on as many expeditions as Igor, I am glad that many years later, a high-level investigation is continuing to understand exactly what happened." The remaining 9 continued their journey. Diaries and cameras found around their last campsite allowed the group to trace their route up to the day before the incident. On January 31, 1959, the group led by Dyatlov approached Kholat Syakhl and began preparations for the ascent. They hid surplus food and equipment for the return trip in a nearby forested valley to reduce the weight they would carry to their final destination, Mount Atordin. On February 1, the group began moving through what is now known as the Dyatlov Pass. They intended to cross the pass and camp the next night on the opposite side. But as weather conditions worsened, they veered westward, toward the summit of Kholat Syakhl. This may have been intentional, or they became disoriented in the snowstorm. The fading light may also have been a factor, as they would have needed to set up camp before sunset. The name, Kholat Syakhl, in Mansi means dead mountain. A name that is as if a warning from nature. And here was the fateful decision. Dyatlov decided to stop and set up camp there on the mountainside in the late afternoon instead of moving down the hill about 1.5 kilometers to a forested area that could provide some shelter from the wind and snow. Why did Igor make this decision? The team realized their mistake near sunset. It was then that Igor Dyatlov decided not to retreat a mile downhill, where a forest provided shelter. His team had already climbed quite high. He did not want to have to regain altitude tomorrow. Instead, they would camp on Dead Mountain. It was the decision of an experienced but perhaps arrogant group. To avoid the wind, they dug 4 feet into the snow, carved a hollow, and pitched their tent inside. This meant cutting into the snow on the slope, an action that scientists later said contributed to the tragedy. The last photo found from their camera shows The last photo of the Dyatlov group was taken before sunset, when they were making a cut in the slope to set up camp. In the photo, they are still smiling, still hopeful. Some also wrote in their diaries, their last living notes before their deaths. Zenaida Kolmogorova noted in her diary, "We often saw Mansi signs on the trail. I wonder what they write," while another companion also recorded that Mansi writings appeared on trees in all sorts of mysterious and incomprehensible characters. Those were the last words. Then they had dinner, climbed into their sleeping bags, and prepared for a night on Dead Mountain. According to camera film and personal diaries later found at the scene by investigators, the team camped on February 1st, setting up a large tent on the snowy slopes of Kholat Syakhl. No one can know what happened that night, but one thing is certain: 9 people, 7 men and 2 women, were never heard from again. They had planned to send a message back to their sports club about 3 weeks after their departure, so when the club did not hear from them by February 20th, a search party was organized to find the climbers. The climbers were scheduled to return home on February 12th, but delays are common on long hikes. So when the 12th came and went, no one worried. Then the 13th passed, and the 14th. By the 15th, friends and family were starting to worry. Where were they? On the 16th, local officials mobilized a rescue team and set off. The search team included volunteers, students, military, police, and even a helicopter. They followed the Dyatlov group's trail into the frozen wilderness. When a search party arrived at Kholat Syakhl a few weeks later, the expedition tent was found only slightly protruding from the snow, and it appeared to have been cut open from the inside. On the 25th of February, Boris Slobtsov and his team found what he believed to be Dyatlov's ski tracks. The next day, they discovered the tent on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl. The sight they saw made everyone shudder. Upon inspection, the sides of the tent were cut from the inside. The nature and shape of all the cuts suggested that they were made by contact with the canvas inside the tent with a blade. Picture this: a tent covered in snow, deflated, with slashes running down the inside. It wasn't someone attacking from the outside. It was the people inside who cut through the tent to get out. Why? What was so terrifying about the tent that they had to do this? The tent entrance faces south. The northern part is covered with 15 to 20 centimeters of snow. It is unclear from the investigation reports whether the tent was cut off on both sides or whether the door was secured. But what's more remarkable, the searcher recalled that there were definitely 8 to 9 footprints left by climbers who were almost shoeless. Footprints in the snow. 9 people had left the tent in the freezing cold of -30 degrees Celsius. Many in just their underwear. No shoes. Running down the mountainside toward the woods. All the footprints leaving the tent and heading toward the woods were consistent with individuals walking at a normal pace. Not running in panic, just walking, as if they knew exactly what they were doing. Here is one of the biggest mysteries: what made 9 experienced people, in such desperate circumstances, act in such a seemingly calm and organized manner? Their gear was still in the tent. Boots, warm coats, food, all were left behind. Why would they die from exposure if they could have reached their winter gear before they went out into the freezing wind? By all accounts, they seemed to have left the tent of their own accord and in a hurry. The search team followed the footprints down the mountainside, into the forest. The first 2 bodies the search team found were those of students Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko. A few hundred yards from the tent, they were lying in their underwear next to the remains of a fire. A fire. They were trying to survive. They were trying to warm themselves. But why at the foot of a cedar tree, more than a kilometer from the tent? Searchers found 3 other bodies scattered nearby, including Igor Dyatlov. All 3 victims had been climbing uphill, possibly toward the tent, but they never made it in the blizzard, and froze to death. These 3 men, Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova and Rustam Slobodin, were found between the cedar and the tent. Their posture suggests they were trying to get back to the tent. Perhaps to get equipment, perhaps to find shelter, but they did not make it. The medical examiner later noted that Krivonishenko had burns on his body and a piece of flesh in his mouth that he had bitten off from his own hand. Why? To keep himself conscious? To stop screaming? This terrifying sight suggests utter desperation. Doroshenko suffered pulmonary edema and lung injury from blunt trauma. Krivonishenko bit off a piece of his knuckle to stay awake or stifle a scream and suffered third-degree burns that would not have been possible if you had fallen asleep while still alive. Dyatlov said Blood and Kolmogorova had club-shaped bruises on her waist. All 5 students appeared to have died of hypothermia, which can cause erratic behavior and paradoxical undressing, a phenomenon in which people begin to undress because they feel hot even though they are freezing to death. Hypothermia might explain the near nakedness of some of the bodies, but it doesn't explain why they left the tent in the first place. February 27 to 28, 1959. Preliminary autopsies of the 5 men revealed no fatal external injuries. The climbers appeared to have died of hypothermia. Slobodin had a small, but not life-threatening, skull fracture. 5 bodies, 5 friends, but 4 more. Where are they? March to April 1959. The thaw continues. But initial rescue operations turn up nothing more, with thick snow still blocking the ravines. The last 4 members of the team remain missing. Thick snow covered everything. Search teams had to wait for spring, for the snow to melt. 4 months passed with family and friends anxious and worried. May 5, 1959. A local Mansi hunter accidentally discovered an incomplete snow pile, a temporary snow shelter, deeper in the forest about 400 meters from the camp. On May 4, 1959, nearly 3 months after the first 5 bodies were found, a local Mansi hunter discovered an incomplete snow shelter deep in the forest, about 70 to 75 meters from the cedar tree. This was a den, a type of shelter dug into the snow. This shows that some members of the group tried to survive. They did not just run out of the tent in panic, but also tried to organize and build shelter. This is a sign of experienced people who know how to survive in the wilderness. Nearby, in a ravine, under 4 meters of snow, the last 4 bodies were found: Lyudmila Dubinina, Semyon Zolotaryov, Nikolai Thibault-Brinol and Alexander Kolevatov. On May 9, 1959, an autopsy was performed, and this is where the mystery turned from strange to horrifying. 3 of these 4 victims did not die of hypothermia. They died of trauma, but not ordinary trauma. Nikolai Thibault-Brinol, 23 years old, suffered a severe skull fracture with bone fragments penetrating the brain, a fatal injury, but no external injuries. Lyudmila Dubinina, 20 years old, her case is truly gruesome. She suffered multiple broken ribs, 6 on the left, 4 on the right. Her rib cage was crushed, causing severe internal bleeding, collapsed lungs, damaged heart, and the most terrifying thing, she lost her tongue, eyes, part of her lips and facial tissue. Her eye sockets were broken. Semyon Zolotaryov, 38, also suffered multiple broken ribs, 5 on the right, 2 on the left. Like Dubinina, his chest was crushed, his lungs collapsed, his heart was damaged. He also lost 2 eyeballs. His neck was twisted. Only Alexander Kolevatov, 24 years old, of this group of 4 died of hypothermia, without serious injuries, although he also lost his eyebrows. Forensic doctor Boris Vozrozhdeny, who performed the autopsy, made a shocking statement. The force required to cause such injuries was comparable to that of a car accident. These rib fractures could not have been caused by an ordinary person. Even in a fist fight, this was a tremendous force, a terrible crushing force. But the strange thing was, there were no external bruises, no open wounds, just broken bones inside. Vozrozhdeny explained, "I think the features of the injuries on Dubinina and Zolotaryov, multiple rib fractures, on Dubinina were bilateral and symmetrical, and on Zolotaryov they were unilateral. Both had hemorrhage into the heart muscle with hemorrhage into the pleural cavity. This is evidence that they were alive when injured and were the result of a large force." Furthermore, the bodies in the ravine had exchanged clothes. Dubinina carried the trousers of Krivonishenko, who had died earlier by the fire. Zolotaryov carried Dubinina's hat and coat. Some of the clothes had cuts, as if they had been forcibly removed from the dead. This suggests that the survivors were trying to take clothing from the dead to keep warm. This was a desperate act of survival. But if they had the time to do this, why didn't they just go back to the tent to get their own gear? And then, One detail makes things even more mysterious. Some of the clothes found on the body had traces of radiation. Specifically, Krivonishenko's trousers, which Dubinina was wearing, contained radiation. So did Kolevatov's jacket. The radiation levels were not so high as to be immediately dangerous. But it was there. Why? This is one of those details that makes many people think of nuclear weapons, secret testing, or even aliens. But there is a more plausible explanation. Krivonishenko and Kolevatov both worked at nuclear facilities. Krivonishenko worked at Mayak, also known as Chelyabinsk 40, a secret plutonium production facility. In 1957, just 2 years before the trip, there was the Kishtom disaster, a radioactive waste storage tank explosion that severely contaminated the area. Kolevatov was also involved in nuclear work. It is possible that their clothes were contaminated with radiation from their daily work, or from living in a contaminated area. However, this does not explain why they would have worn radioactive clothing while hiking. Some researchers also point out that camping lanterns of the time used clothing coated with thorium, a mildly radioactive substance. It is possible that clothing was exposed to the lantern for a long time. But whatever the reason, the presence of radiation has turned this story into a much larger mystery, spawning countless theories and conspiracies. Of all the macabre details of the Dyatlov Pass incident, perhaps the most chilling image is that of Lyudmila Dubinina's missing tongue. When her body was found, she was kneeling, her face and chest pressed against the rock, as if trying to move or resist in her final moments. Her mouth was open, and her tongue was gone. Not just the tongue, part of the lips, eyes, and facial tissue were also missing. The orbital bone was broken. This has sparked countless horror theories. Did someone cut out her tongue? Did she scream and someone wanted to gag her? Was this an act of torture? But forensic Dr. Vozrozhdeny offered a scientific explanation. Dubinina's body lay in a running stream. Water, bacteria, and scavengers had destroyed the soft tissues. The tongue, eyes, lips, these were the softest parts, most susceptible to decomposition and cannibalism. In fact, all 4 bodies in the stream had soft tissue damage to the head and face. Zolotaryov was missing an eyeball. Kolevatov was missing an eyebrow. This is consistent with natural decomposition in a moist environment. These injuries occurred post-mortem due to the position of the bodies in the stream, Vozrozhdeny concluded. However, some details remain questionable. For example, Dubinina's orbital bone was broken, something that would be unlikely to have occurred simply through natural decomposition. Had she been hit in the face? Or was this the result of falling into a ravine? Whichever explanation is correct, the image of a 20-year-old girl, full of passion for life, lying dead in the snow with her tongue missing, remains one of the most heartbreaking and horrifying images of this incident. On May 28, 1959, prosecutor Lev Ivanov questioned forensic Dr. Boris Vozrozhdeny about the injuries. Ivanov: how can the causes of the injuries to Dubinina and Zolotaryov be explained? Is it possible to combine them into one cause? Vozrozhdeny: I think the features of the injuries on Dubinina and Zolotaryov, multiple rib fractures. On Dubinina they were bilateral and symmetrical. And on Zolotaryov they were unilateral. Both had hemorrhage into the heart muscle with hemorrhage into the pleural cavity. This is evidence that they were alive when they were injured and were the result of a large force, similar to the force of a car accident. The force of a car accident, on top of a mountain, in the middle of winter, no cars. Investigators considered many theories: attacks by local Mansi people, wild animals, even an avalanche, but there was no sign of a struggle, no footprints by strangers, no evidence of an avalanche, no snow patterns, no debris, no damaged trees. Finally, in May 1959, just weeks after the last 4 bodies were found, prosecutor Lev Ivanov closed the case. Official reason: due to the absence of the waiting party, there was no one to blame. The cause of death was given vaguely: they died of a compelling natural force. It's unclear what that force was. The records were archived and classified. The area around Dyatlov Pass was closed for 3 years. No one was allowed in. Why? If this was just a regular climbing accident, why was the area closed? Why was the case classified? This led to numerous suspicions of a cover-up by the Soviet government. Were they hiding something? Was this a secret weapons test gone wrong? Had these students accidentally witnessed something they were not supposed to see? During the investigation, several local Mansi people were questioned. The Mansi are indigenous to the Ural Mountains and are experienced reindeer herders and hunters. Initially, it was suspected that the Mansi had attacked the expedition for trespassing on their sacred land. The names, Kolat Syakal, Dead Mountain, and Atortan, don't go there, seemed to be warnings. But after questioning, investigators concluded that the Mansi were not involved. They were peaceful people, with no reason to attack. Moreover, there was no trace of strangers at the scene. However, there is one notable detail. Some Mansi and local residents reported seeing strange bright orbs in the night sky on February 1–2, 1959, the very night that the Dyatlov group died. Witnesses described the orbs as bright orange or yellow, flying rapidly across the sky, leaving a trail of light behind. Some even said they saw explosions in the sky. This has led to theories about missiles, military testing, or even UFOs. In fact, at that time the Soviet Union was actively testing the R-7 and R-7A missiles at the Baikonur test site. These missiles, when launched or re-entered the atmosphere, could produce a similar light effect. Furthermore, the area was not far from secret military facilities. Could the Dyatlovs have accidentally witnessed a military test? Were they in the wrong place at the wrong time? In March 1959, the funerals of the first 5 victims were held in the city of Sverdlovsk, now Yekaterinburg. Thousands of people came to say goodbye. Families, friends, teachers, classmates, everyone was shocked and saddened. In the crowd was a 12-year-old boy named Yuri Kuntsevich. He stood watching the coffin being carried away, looking at the faces of young people who never had the chance to live out their lives. The image was seared into his mind. Years later, Yuri Kuntsevich founded the Dyatlov Foundation and the Dyatlov Museum in Yekaterinburg, dedicating his life to investigating and remembering the victims. He has fought for the Russian government to reopen the investigation. In May 1959, the funerals of the last 4 victims were held. Their coffins were closed. The families were not allowed to see the bodies. Why? Some say the bodies were too badly disfigured, but others suspect the authorities didn't want the families to see strange injuries. Signs that something was wrong. Yuri Yudin, the only survivor, was invited to identify his friend's belongings. When he saw familiar items, cameras, diaries, clothes, Yudin broke down and cried. It should have been him, with them on the mountain of death. Yudin then devoted the rest of his life to finding answers. He became one of the most enthusiastic investigators of the case, traveling everywhere, interviewing witnesses, and collecting evidence. For me, this is not an abstract mystery, he said. This is about my friends, people I love. I have to know what happened to them. Yudin died in 2013, never knowing the full truth. 9 young people, full of dreams and enthusiasm, set out into the winter of 1959 hoping to conquer a mountain peak. They never returned. The tent ripped open from the inside. Bare footprints in the snow. 5 frozen bodies. 4 bodies with horrific injuries. Radioactive clothing. Disappeared tongues. Bright orbs in the sky. Story takes us through their final journey. From happy days on the train, to their fateful decision to pitch a tent on Dead Mountain, and to their mysterious death on a cold snowy night. But we still don't have answers to the most important questions. What made them leave the tent in panic? Why did they act in an organized manner instead of running around in panic? What force caused the terrible injuries to the 3 victims? Why is there radiation on clothes? What are the glowing orbs? And most importantly, was the Soviet government hiding something? We'll delve into the official investigation, the hidden evidence, and the witnesses whose stories were never told. We'll uncover details the Soviet government didn't want made public. The mystery has only just begun, and it will only get darker and more complicated. But before we move on, let's take a moment to remember these 9 people: Igor, Zenaida, Lyudmila, Yuri Doroshenko, Jorge Krivonishenko, Alexander Kolevatov, Rustam, Nikolai, and Semyon. They were not just numbers in a cold case. They were real people, with dreams, families, and futures. Futures they never had. Dyatlov Pass, where 9 young souls remained forever amidst the white snow and cold wind. And their mystery continues to haunt us, more than 6 decades later. The official investigation into the Dyatlov Pass incident was initiated on February 26, 1959, headed by Ivdel prosecutor Vasily Tempelov, and later transferred to Lev Nikitich Ivanov, a veteran prosecutor from the Sverdlovsk Regional Prosecutor's Office. Lev Ivanov, a 30-year-old man with experience investigating serious criminal cases, arrived at the scene believing that this would be a solvable case. But the more he investigated, the more he realized that there were forces trying to prevent him from finding the truth. According to the records in the investigation file, Ivanov conducted a fairly comprehensive investigation, 5 inspections of the crime scene, mapping of the area, sketching of the campsite, questioning of witnesses, autopsies. All seemed like a standard investigation. But when compared to other cases from the same period, legal experts later discovered many irregularities. An examination conducted by the Sverdlovsk Regional Prosecutor's Office at the request of the Komsomolskaya Pravda newspaper in 2018 compared the Dyatlov file with other cases from 1958 to 1960 and found the Dyatlov file lacked many mandatory procedures, showed signs of being typed on the same typewriter at the prosecutor's office instead of at the forensic medicine department, and contained many typographical and grammatical errors that did not appear to have been written by a medical expert. What's even more suspicious, there was no official order to conduct an autopsy. The histological examinations of the first 5 victims have disappeared. It's unclear who's conducting the investigation, Tempelov or Ivanov. The crime scene photos look more like they came from an amateur photo album than a professional investigative photo. And the strangest thing, there's an interrogation record dated February 6. While the investigation only began on February 26. All this suggests the investigation was tampered with from higher up. On May 27, 1959, an important report was completed. Report on the analysis of radioactivity on the clothes and tissues of the last 4 victims, Dubinina, Kolevatov, Thibaut Brinol and Zolotaryov. The person who made the report was Levashov, a radiation expert. He discovered that some pieces of clothing had significantly higher levels of radiation than normal. Specifically, Krivonishenko's pants, which Dubinina was wearing, and Kolevatov's jacket both had traces of radiation. On May 28, 1959, just 1 day after the radioactivity report was completed, Lev Ivanov closed the case. On May 29, 1959, the following day, Levashov was summoned to explain his findings further. He confirmed that this level of radiation could not have been due to natural exposure. But it was too late. The case was closed. The timing was no coincidence. Many researchers believe that when radiation was discovered, a detail of national security concern during the Cold War, high-ranking officials ordered Ivanov to close the case immediately. On May 28, 1959, prosecutor Lev Ivanov signed a decision to close the case citing, due to the absence of the guilty party. There is no one to blame. There is no crime. There is no murderer. The cause of death was given as a compelling natural force which the hikers were unable to overcome. This is one of the most ambiguous conclusions in the history of Soviet criminal investigation. Forcing force of nature, what was it? Wind? Avalanche? Lightning? Wild animals? Ivanov did not explain. And then, something even stranger happened. The case files were classified and sent to a secret archive. The area around Dyatlov Pass was closed for 3 years. No one was allowed to enter. Why? If this was just an unfortunate natural disaster, why was the case classified? Why was the area closed? 30 years have passed. The Soviet Union has collapsed. Freedom of speech has begun to be established in Russia. And those who had been silenced have begun to speak out. In 1990, Lev Ivanov, who had closed the case in 1959, published a sensational article in a local newspaper in which he admitted things he could not say in 1959. "My team and I have no reasonable explanation for this incident," Ivanov wrote. He revealed that during the investigation, he and his team saw flying spheres in the sky in the Dyatlov Pass area. But when he reported this, he received direct orders from high-ranking officials of the region to refute this claim. He also spoke of strange burn marks on trees near where the bodies were found. These marks did not look like those from a typical campfire. Ivanov believed they were evidence of a source of heat ray that had been deliberately aimed at some of the victims. Heat ray? This is an amazing detail. Is Ivanov referring to some kind of weapon? A technology the Soviets were testing? He also revealed that he was pressured by his superiors to close the case quickly. Not to dig into certain details. There were things that he was not allowed to investigate. Yevgeny Okashev, Lev Ivanov's boss, deputy head of the investigation department of the Sverdlovsk Regional Prosecutor's Office, lived until 2015. In an interview with former prosecutor Leonid Proshkin, Okashev dropped cryptic hints about the truth. Okashev said that he was preparing for another trip to the Dyatlov Pass to fully investigate the strange deaths of the last 4 victims. When Deputy Prosecutor General Yurakov arrived, Yurakov, a high-ranking official from Moscow, brought an order from above, conclude that the Dyatlov group died in an accident. No further investigation. Okashev recalled. The death of the Dyatlov group was full of secrecy. I received orders from above to say it was an accident. In the interview, Okashev did not say directly what happened, but he dropped many hints. He said he knew exactly what happened, but he had to keep it a secret for life because he signed a confidentiality agreement. However, due to the deep sense of guilt that has not left him since the case was closed, he has made direct suggestions about the cause of death of the 9 climbers, indicating the direction to search for the truth. Okashev died in 2015, taking his secret to the grave. There is indirect evidence for this. In 1997, it was discovered that the negatives from Krivonishenko's camera were kept in Lev Ivanov's private archive, not in the official files. Why did Ivanov keep them? Did he want to protect some of the evidence from being destroyed? Ivanov's daughter later donated these negatives to the Dyatlov Foundation. They contained the last photographs of the group, photographs that perhaps held clues. Among the recovered rolls of film, there is one roll that is particularly controversial. This is the last roll of film from Krivonishenko or Zolotaryov's camera. It is unclear which one. There are several frames on this roll of film that are damaged, blurry, or unclear. Some say these frames show a strange bright object in the sky. Others say it is simply a film defect from overexposure or damage from months in the snow. Sergei Sogrin, a researcher, believes that the Dyatlov group photographed a man-made disaster, and then died or were killed for becoming unwanted witnesses to a secret. Is this plausible? Had they accidentally witnessed a military test, and thus remained silent forever? More than 65 years have passed since that fateful night on Dead Mountain. 9 young people never returned from their journey, but their story lives on, still haunts, still makes us question. The Dyatlov Pass tragedy has become one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century. It has inspired hundreds of books, documentaries, films, articles, and countless internet discussions. It has kept scientists, investigators, filmmakers, and mystery enthusiasts from around the world searching for answers for years. But perhaps the important question is not, what happened, but, who were they? Igor Dyatlov, an excellent student, a natural leader, a good friend, he dreams of becoming a top radio engineer. Zenaida Kolmogorova, a smart, cheerful girl who loved nature. She wrote in her diary about the beauty of the mountains and forests. Lyudmila Dubinina, strong, courageous, passionate, she survived a hunting shooting, and continued to pursue her passion for mountain climbing. Yuri Doroshenko, Jorge Krivonishenko, Alexander Kolevatov, Rustam Slobodin, Nikolai Thibault-Brinol, Semyon Zolotaryov, each has their own story, their own dreams, their own relatives. They are not numbers in a mystery. They are real people, with real lives, with real futures they will never have. The family lived with the pain of loss and uncertainty for decades. Igor's mother, Zenaida, visited the spot where her son died every year until her death. She never stopped searching for answers. Yuri Yudin, the survivor, carried the pain and guilt for the remaining 54 years of his life. He often asked himself, why me? Why did I survive and they didn't? He dedicated his life to honoring the memory of his friends. Today, if you visit Dyatlov Pass, now officially known as Dyatlov Pass, you will see a memorial plaque erected in 2013. It bears the names of 9 victims and a simple inscription. In winter, when snow covers everything, when the wind blows from the top of Kholat Syakhl, you can imagine what happened that fateful night. You can imagine the screaming, the panic, the fear, or maybe the eerie calm, the determination, the final hope that they would survive. But then, there was only silence, the silence of snow, of wind, of departed souls. Many climbers say that when they reached Dyatlov Pass, they felt something strange, a heavy feeling, a presence. Perhaps it was just their imagination, influenced by the story, or perhaps something was still there, waiting to be understood, to be released. Dear listeners, we have been on a long journey together, from the joyful early days of 9 young students, to the fateful night on Dead Mountain, to the mysterious investigation, and finally to countless theories trying to explain the unexplainable. We've heard about avalanches, about infrasound, about military testing, about UFOs, about Yetis. Each theory has its believers. Each theory has evidence for and against it. But in the end, a mystery remains a mystery. And perhaps that is what makes this story immortal. If you're listening to this story before bed, I hope it hasn't kept you up, although it probably has. The Dyatlov Pass tragedy is a terrifying story, a tragic story, but it's also a story of courage, of friendship, of the passion for discovery. 9 people came to the mountain with a dream. They did not return, but their memories, their stories, their lessons, all live on in us. 9 souls on Dead Mountain. 9 stories yet to be told. 9 mysteries still linger, amidst the snow and cold wind of the Ural Mountains. This is the Hidden Cipher, a channel dedicated to decoding the most mysterious mysteries on the planet. Thank you for joining us on our journey to uncover the Dyatlov Pass tragedy. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on future mysteries. You may not sleep as soundly as you promised, but at least you'll lie there and ponder the unsolved mysteries of this world. And perhaps that's what makes life more interesting. Hope you get a good night's sleep, if you can. And remember, sometimes the greatest mysteries are not the ones that are solved, but the ones that keep us searching. Keep asking questions. Keep hoping that one day, the truth will be revealed. See you in the next video of the Hidden Cipher.